Hey, Nathan here, welcome back to another video for the PGL2D Alpha series. And in this video, we're going to discuss the GameEntity class. So, in the last few videos, we have discussed a few interfaces. And in this video, we're going to use a few of them in our class. This is going to be our root GameEntity class. It's going to be an abstract class. We will not be able to create an instance of this class. So let's right click our game object folder and let's go to add new item, and it's going to be a class this time, and it's going to be game entity. Alright, let's minimize that. It's going to be a public abstract class. Now this is going to use the three interfaces we're going to use for this is iFreezable, iHideable, and iRemovable. And you can add all those properties that we made in those interfaces. You'll have to add those in our class. If you're using a ReSharper, you can just click that little red light bulb and go to implement missing members and then finish that. So we just needed to add iFrozen, is hidden, and request deletion. And that is complaining about, okay. The other thing we want to add is another public boolean, public bool initialized get and private set. Our request deletion, that's going to be internal set. We only want to set that in our PGL2D library. Is frozen and is hidden are fine with public set. Now let's create the constructor. Now the only thing we're going to set in the constructor is initialized. So we're going to set that to false. It is not initialized at this moment because we're going to have a dedicated initialize method. Now the constructor will be used to populate all the properties and everything we need to construct the object. But to actually initialize the object, we're going to use the initialize method. So after all of our properties, let's create a public virtual void initialize. And that's going to just set it to initialized is equal to true. Next, we want to have a method to uninitialize, which will set it to initialized as false. So I chose the name terminate for that. Public virtual void terminate. Initialize is equal to false. So this method will handle if the object will be deleted or if the object will become in an uninitialized state. For an example, I mentioned in a previous video where if you're creating and destroying a lot of objects, you might want to keep a lot of those readily available. You'll just have to reset those. Like a particle system, for example. A lot of implementations of that use a whole bunch of particles already generated. You will just reset the state and set its color and everything depending on what the particle should be at that instant. When it's destroyed, it goes to an inactive state and it will become ready to be pulled from the pool again. So that's why you would use terminate. When you reset it, it will terminate. Everything will be uninitialized and it will become ready to be used again. This object is going to have an update method. Remember, an object doesn't have to be movable to be able to be updatable. For example, if it's non-movable, but you have a sprite sheet associated with it, it can be updated by updating that sprite sheet. Maybe it has an animation sprite sheet. So public void update. We need to provide the game time and game time. And if it is frozen, we're just going to simply return. Otherwise, we're going to call a public abstract void method. So let's go ahead and create that before we call it. Or actually, it's protected, not public. So protected abstract void update entity. Pass a game time, and let's call it game time. So let's call that in our update method. So that is just going to handle if it is frozen, it's not going to do anything. Otherwise, it's going to call our update entity. Now we need to do the same thing with draw here. So let's go ahead and actually create the protected abstract void draw entity. And it's going to be game time is what we'll call it, and sprite batch. And we'll need to add using Microsoft.xnay.framework.graphics at the top, sprite batch, and let's call it sprite batch. Okay, before that method, let's create a method for public void draw. And that's going to have game time, and we'll call it game time, and a sprite batch, and we'll call it sprite batch. So similarly to the update, if is hidden, we're just going to return. Otherwise, we're going to call draw entity, provide the game time, and sprite batch. So that is it for this class. It's a very short class. It's just our base for all game entities. In the next video, we will discuss iCollidable. And that will be the last interface for a little while. So I hope to see you next time.